After the ashes of the Holocaust, Israel was reborn. Today on this program, we are going to see how these contrasting events fulfill Bible prophecy.
I will console those who mourn in Zion, to give them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness, that they may be called oaks of righteousness, the planting of Adonai, that he may be glorified.
Shalom Chavarim, welcome friends, welcome to our program. I'm Miles Weiss.
And I'm Catherine Weiss, and the series that we have for you today, it is called Beauty for Ashes. You know, the horror of the Holocaust we're contrasting with the vibrancy of the new state of Israel.
Yeah, it's a miracle. It is a miracle that out of that horror, as you say, this incredibly vibrant, forward-thinking, inventive, creative, loving nation has been born. The Jewish people, we don't like to use the word Holocaust, that's the Greek, so we say Hashoah, which means the destruction or the catastrophe.
Wow.
And it's more of an understanding of what happened, because the other words seem to imply some kind of fiery sacrifice. It's related to pagan thought. And so Jewish people use Hashoah. There's even a day for celebrating, remembering, yes, observing what was lost there. Our typical associations have to do with the crematoria and the graves and all of the things we've seen in movies and heard over the years. But sometimes the Nazis, in their expedient Germanic way at the time, were in such a hurry to get rid of people that they would just take them out and shoot them without any discussion.
Right.
So we took some time to go to what's called the execution wall or the death wall. And it was very emotional, also called the Black Wall.
Yeah.
Speaking of death, it was...
There's just no words to describe what you feel when you're in Auschwitz. You actually do hear the blood still crying out, like in reference to, you know, when Abel, the blood was spilt by Cain.
Yes.
You know, God marks those things that aren't supposed to have happened. So now, let's go now and hear more from Miles in Poland.
We're here on our way to the infamous death wall, execution place. On this side is the building 10, block 10, which was sealed to try to prevent people from hearing the sounds of the execution, but it was here where the experiments were beginning to take place, including forced sterilization. You have to know that the Nazis, in their desire to create a master race, started with the Slavs and the Poles and then the Jews and the Gypsies, etc., because their desire was to, in several generations, wipe out any of the inferior races. On this side is Block 11. Block 11 is where all hope was lost. They were on their way to extermination. They would be brought out here to be shot. The most salient thing is that the Germans, being German, used German law, so-called, in order to make this appear as a courtroom where people were politically being executed. And so they would be called out on their infraction of German law and then shot here at the death wall. This is the execution wall, the death wall. This is where the blood was so thick they had to periodically change the sand to soak up the blood of the prisoners that were executed here. You have to remember, this was a scientific extermination over many years.
You know, it is so sobering to be here because you can literally hear the blood crying out from this place. It's surreal, and it's a place that it was important for us to come and to not only pay our respects to the people that passed here, but to remember and to pass on the memory of the women that were tortured, the men that were tortured, the children who died simply for their whole crime was because they were a Jew. You know, it was cruel beyond cruel. The women were shaven, they were taking their clothes off, they were tattooed, they were become animals. And the whole crime, again, was because they were a Jew or maybe somebody who helped the Jewish people. So we need to remember, we need to know that humanism, like Miles was saying, will not fix this. We have to understand that the knowledge of good and evil is the knowledge of death. We have to partake of the knowledge of the tree of life.
It's hard to speak from this place, knowing that it was a systematic place of execution. It's hard to do, but as Catherine said, we want you to remember. We want you to never forget. We want you to stand with Israel and the Jewish people. And we want you to know that Yeshua is the only answer. I think you can see from these segments that we were overcome with emotion. It was really hard to be standing there and to really sense the history, much more than I expected to.
Well, you sense what man can do when he's inspired by the devil.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, the exact opposite of what the modern state of Israel is. It's man inspired by God and his word, and the word coming alive.
Yeah, and they didn't bother. We always often associate Holocaust movies and history with the showers and the gas and the crematorium, but sometimes the Nazis, they didn't want to bother, and they would just put certain people in these barracks and then just slaughter them with gunshot. And so there's this wall that you saw, and the degradation was so systematic. There was this high level of care for animals. There was a real ethical animal treatment culture in Germany at the time. And so to put the Jews in cattle cars was to basically say that they were less value than the animals.
Wow. Well, we talked with two survivors, and we're going to go hear their stories now of how they were transported in these cattle cars to Auschwitz.
We were herded in from our houses into a ghetto,
Yes.
a specific area of the town where all the Jews were gathered.
Yes.
And we were told that we had been going to be taken to work in farms in Hungary. And my mother made from canvas rucksacks
Yes.
for us. And she filled them in with all the daily needs we needed to be taken wherever. One morning we had orders to get ready, and we are going to be marched into this brick factory from where we are going to be taken by train. So we filled up these rucksacks, and what is very much in my memory is that when we put on these rucksacks with a weight on them, they started tearing, and we had to pull them, and everybody helped everybody with their bags. And we marched for nearly 4 hours till we got to the brick factory. Half of the rucksacks were left on the floor. We couldn't cope. And then we had to sleep on the floor in this brick factory till our transport, till our group were ready to get onto this cattle truck train. And we got onto these cattle truck trains. We were about 120 people in a cattle truck train. There was no room to move. There was no room to sit, just like
Standing.
sardines.
Yes.
And the train started to move. And my father looked out through that little window, and he saw the names of the stations, and he said, "Children, it's no good. They're taking us to Poland." And we knew already then what's happening to the Jews in Poland. They were killing them. But we couldn't do anything about it.
The ride in the cattle car was horrific in the sense people crammed in a car going to who knows where. It was very hard. It was the last week in May. This little crowded tin box of a car heated up tremendously. So when the train would stop, because there was no other way for us to ask for anything, we would ask the guard by our cattle car for water. And he would always say 5 gold watches. They were very interested in gold. And when the grown-ups gathered that, he would pick a bucket of water from the ground outside and kind of throw it toward one of the windows. So I wondered at the time, why do we keep asking for gold watches, giving them gold watches, and asking for water? Because there had to be another reason. It wasn't for the water we were getting. Well, I didn't really understand it until 1978, when I realized that the reason we were trying to find out that we were asking for water and giving them gold watches, we were trying to find out where they were taking us. We did not believe them that they were going to take us to Hungary to a slave labor camp. We were very concerned that we would be taken to Germany to be murdered. It was a third night in the cattle car. The train stopped, we asked for water, and the answer came back in German. I was 10 years old. I instantly understood what happened. The train has crossed the border into Germany, and our Hungarian guards have been changed to German. That, of course, meant that we were not going to Hungary to a labor camp, but we were being taken to Germany to be murdered. Everybody in our cattle car understood it, and people were praying.
One of the common themes we hear in these testimonies is the systematic deception that was used by the Nazis to kind of bring a false calm to people so they could take them into the next step of destruction. And
well, people think that the Jewish people didn't resist at all. They did resist, but anytime they did resist, their family members were tortured, or that resistance was put out immediately. Right.
There was also this continued false hope that was given. Exactly. That's why we contrast in an earlier program the difference between false hope and hatikva, the hope. Right. And we really hear that from these survivors, that they were little by little just lied to until they were able to be taken to where the Nazis had them go. And we understand from this that we wrestle not against flesh and blood. This is a spiritual battle. It manifests itself in the earth through real people doing real evil. Right. And we need to attend to that. But ultimately, it's a war over the souls of men. Yeah. It goes back to the Garden of Eden. It goes back to the fall of Satan. Right. And we see that playing out in these lives as they are being systematically reduced and being filleted open by this death machine. It's very sobering. We'll be back after this.
Our offer this week, The Holocaust, a series of 6 programs that covers the most tragic event in world history. Zola Levitt reports on the awful Holocaust through hard-hitting interviews and location taping at the Dachau concentration camp. As an insidious form of anti-Semitism now grows around the globe, it behooves us to be aware of the historical perspective that brought Adolf Hitler's regime into power, the Holocaust, featuring the teaching of Zola Levitt.
Hi, you know, so much is happening in the world today regarding Bible prophecy, and especially in Israel too. This is the lens through which everything has to be told, and that's what we're doing here at Zola Levitt Presents. We're only able to do it as you're able to give. Your generous donations keep our program going. So please continue to give as you are able, and we will continue to bring you the news through this word.
Come with us to Israel on one of our tours. It is the miracle of the rebirth of Israel, and your feet will stand where the patriarchs stood. It's a land that speaks of prophecy fulfilled. It's a miracle, and I love taking our pilgrims with us. We go fall and spring.
Yeah, it's really wonderful to see how God has overcome the attempt to wipe out the Jewish people. We see this in the 20th century with the Nazis. They killed 1/3 of all the Jews in the world, and yet God has redeemed the land, brought the people back, and there's going to be more and more opportunity to be there looking for the coming of Messiah. We just encourage you to come with us to Israel. And one of the things you'll see in this upcoming segment is the abundance of life. So let's go to the marketplace in Jerusalem. We're here in Machane Yehuda, the Jewish market. It's colloquially called the Shuk. And really it's a scene of unparalleled busyness, especially now during Purim. It's a time of celebration. You might see some costumes. We're here, and one of the stories of Israel that has to be told is the incredible power of the reclamation of the land, the reclaiming of the land, and the power of the reclaiming of the water through the technologies that have developed here. So many things, innovative things, have taken place here in Israel that have not been anywhere else in the world. For example, I know that you have tasted cherry tomatoes during your life, no question about it. You've tasted these cherry tomatoes. They were developed here in Israel. You might find that some things that are typically smaller and easier to deal with in a compact way have been developed here. Why? Because it's a tiny place. This whole country is the size of the state of New Jersey. And so what's gone on here is a dream come true of green technology developing all kinds of ways of technologically improving the amount of produce that can come from the land. For example, the breadbasket of Israel, the Jezreel Valley. We found that the original wheat that we see all over the land, all over the world, the original wheat could be traced to the Jezreel Valley. What does that mean? It means that, surprise, the bread of life began right here in Israel. And that is not surprising, as we know Mashiach has come from Beit Lechem, from Bethlehem, the house of bread. We see this throughout the land, this incredible produce, the development of concentrated amounts of food for the small place, the small amount of land. When you see this variety, all this incredible variety of produce, everywhere we go in the land, you'll see this. Developed originally in the kibbutzim. Kibbutzim comes from the root word kibatzti. Jeremiah 29:14 speaks about kibatzti, about gathering. And that's what we see here. Look at these dried fruits. Incredible. We have to try this. We'll try this mishmish, an apricot. See if my friend will let me buy one from him. Thank you. I will pick the most beautiful mishmish I could find. I wish you could taste this. We have the best produce in the world here, developed without hardly any water, because the water system is one of the great stories of Israel. For example, the fish here. In order to develop the fish farms, water had to be reclaimed. So desalinization is one of the major projects of Israel. 80% of the water used in this land is reclaimed water. Some through desalinization, some through the incredible drip system of irrigation that was developed here in Israel. And it's interesting how that happened. A man named Simcha Blas, in around 1950s, he was walking along his kibbutz, and he saw that some of the trees were larger than the others. And he went to one of the larger trees and he found a broken pipe from the water system that flowed from the Galilee to the rest of the nation. A broken pipe, and he noticed that the dripping from the broken pipe created this incredible growth. And the idea for drip irrigation began here. And it's been exported from here to 110 nations. One of the great stories of the reclamation are the fish farms. Sea bass, tilapia, barramundi. These fish are developed in fish ponds throughout the country, and then the wastewater from the fish farms is used to irrigate the olive groves. It's a complete story of green technology in its best case possible. It is being developed everywhere. And the story of Israel is the story of reclamation. It's the story of green coming from brown, of the incredible growth of reclamation and restoration. It's part of God's story for this land, which is the story of restoration and is leading to a spiritual restoration that will usher in the coming of Messiah.
Here we are in the Shuk on a Friday morning. People are getting ready for Shabbat. It's actually Purim. But you know what? Mark Twain said in 1867, this land was a desolate wasteland. There were trees that were no more because of the heavy tax from the Turks. The land was called in sackcloth and ashes. It was desolate, but the Israelis came back to the land and the land began to flourish. It began to bud. It began to produce. You know, it said that the land smiled on the Israelis as they came back.
Yeah.
There were swamps that they drained.
Yeah.
There were, rock miles that they had to unearth. And now, instead of swamps and desert and rocky terrain, there are farms, there are vineyards, and there are just beautiful orchards that produce this kind of fruit. You see, this land is flowing with milk and honey now because of the Israelis back, and because, most of all, God's promise to this land that it would once again bring forth life.
At the beginning of this rebirth, 1/3 of the immigrants had malaria. But 20 years after the state was established, malaria was completely eliminated because the swamps were drained. At first, the Israelis brought in eucalyptus trees, hoping that they would drain the water, but that didn't work. So they had to dig canals to drain the swamps out towards the Mediterranean in order to dry out the land. But they made some discoveries along the way. One is that in the sandy soil, one of the crops that would flourish is a vineyard, were the grapes. And so the fulfillment of Amos chapter 9, that the mountains would flow with sweet wine, came to be once again. Mark Twain, he saw for a moment what was going on, but he didn't see what God was about to do.
Yeah, and it also goes on and says in Amos 9, all the way through the end of the chapter, that the Israelis would never be plucked up again. So this is a further restoration. You see, they came back and God fulfilled his word to them. We are living here in prophecy. Isaiah 35 says that the desert shall bloom like a rose, and we are seeing it bloom once again.
This is the story of the greening of the earth. 80% of the water that's used in Israel is reclaimed. The second largest reclamation nation is Spain, with only 10% of their water being reused. So this is a real success story. Everything here is dependent on the water, but the Israelis have understood how to reclaim, how to desalinate, and how to use water in ways that could never be seen before. Every day, 450 million cubic meters of water are reclaimed and used in Israel.
Yeah, and it's been also said that there is nothing like the Israelis, because they don't keep all these wonderful technology breakthroughs. They share it with the world.
Grain Pro is a covering that's used over the freshly picked grain to keep the rodents and the bugs from it. They've exported that technology to countries that don't even have diplomatic ties with Israel, such as Pakistan. And one of the most incredible finds has been the talia. It's called God's dew. They noticed that if they were careful to collect the dew in circular tubs around the trees, around the plants, they could increase the use of water. And so they have a technology called talia, or God's dew, that uses every single bit of water from heaven and that comes up from below the earth.
So we invite you to come to Israel and come smell the rose that is blooming.
Come and taste and see the fruit of the Lord here in Israel.
After being barren for generations, the land of Israel is back in full bloom. The land is teeming with agriculture, and just the ingenuity of the drip system alone has caused it to bloom, Miles.
Yeah, I was thinking, but as you were saying that the land is blooming and business is booming. It is just going in every direction.
Absolutely.
High tech and medicine and education is just full of life. When you look at what we've seen at Auschwitz and what we've seen of the darkness, and now to see what's happening in the land, it's overwhelming. I never get tired of looking into and finding out what God is doing there, because it's such a model for how resurrection life comes from the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Yeshua went into the depths of the hell pit, the grave, and came out on the other side.
Right. He's the first fruits of many brethren. So the picture in his life as our Messiah of death and then life coming. Same thing with Israel. Israel, like Lazarus, was dead and now it's alive. And that's possible for anyone who will say yes to the Lord, yes to the Messiah. And I think that's probably why we get so excited about people coming with us, because
it's a foretaste of what we'll see.
Exactly. The beginning of the banqueting table, the beginning of the foreshadowing of what heaven will be like, what life is like in the presence of the Lord forever. And it's just very satisfying to know that even the darkest, most difficult time, in one of the most darkest times in human history, could not hold down what God wants to raise up.
Amen.
And we get to be part of that. That's awesome.
It's a beautiful thing to see.
And we like to always remind you at the end of each program, Shalu Shalom Yerushalayim.
Pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Our monthly newsletter, The Levitt Letter, is free and full of insightful articles and news commentary from a messianic perspective. Visit levitt.com to find our newsletter, along with current and past programs, our television schedule, and much more.
Don't forget to order this week's resource by calling 1-800-WONDERS, or you can purchase it from our catalog at levitt.com.
Your donations to Zola Levitt Ministries help these organizations bless Israel. Please remember, Zola Levitt Ministries depends on tax-deductible donations from viewers like you.
This has been a paid program by Zola Levitt Ministries.